everybody. Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. This is episode 1 of season 2. It is the 2026 era. Before I go too far into this episode, though, I want to do an apology right off the bat. In the last episode of 2025, I told you there would be a silent date tell-all, and I had the best of intentions when I told you that. Here's the thing, though. Life kind of gets in the way. Silent date guy ended up having to work a few more shifts than he thought he was going to have to work over the holidays. That happens. I did some traveling over the holidays, and it was amazing to see my family and some friends, but the schedules kind of got mixed up. So we didn't get a chance to record the tell-all. We've talked about it a lot, including last night, and I can tell you for sure, it's going to get recorded this week, and it's going to be out mid to late this week. You'll hear the tell-all with Silent Date Guy. So if you were checking into this one, looking for an update, there it is. It isn't done yet, but it will be done soon, and I think you're going to really like it because there's some good stuff that we've got to talk about. But I am excited to get into this episode because I think this topic is going to be one that's hard for a lot of people. Today, I'm going to talk about what happened in Venezuela over the weekend. And I know there's a lot of people who are listening to this pod or maybe watching part of it on YouTube. Hello, if you're looking for the video, it is on my YouTube channel now. Just check out Scott Fox On Air. There's a lot of folks who have heard some unsavory things about this Nicolás Maduro character, and they aren't sure how they feel about him, but it seems like the Venezuelans are happy, so maybe we should be happy too that he's gone. But then again, it was Donald Trump that did it. And I know there's a lot of people who just don't like Donald Trump. There's a lot of people who don't like the man, and whatever he does, they think has got to be bad. So how do we square this circle? Where do we go from here? Is it okay to be happy that Maduro is no longer running Venezuela, but upset in how it was done? Yeah, I guess there is something to that. So we're going to talk about that in this episode of Scott Fox After 9. One of the other things that I want to do before I even get to the audio that I'm going to play for you, and it's going to include some President Trump, it's going to be Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and a lot more. I also want to tell you, and I want to do this right at the beginning, I have a bias. And the reason that I'm telling you I have a bias is because I think anybody who is reporting on news or information or current events should declare their bias. And we all have one. But you don't see that on the television news very often, do you? You don't hear that from a radio reporter or from a newspaper columnist very often. They've all got a bias. And if they don't declare it, I feel like that's misleading. So I want you to know that what you hear in this episode is coming to you from the lens of a conservative member of the middle class, from a conservative broadcaster. And not that I intend to espouse a whole bunch of conservative values on you here. That's not what this is. I'm telling you because you should know that my bias is I'm a conservative, and you're going to hear things through my lens. Now, you might get a completely other story about what's going on in Venezuela if it's told to you from the lens of a liberal. Well, the thing is, most of the members of the mainstream media are liberals. They're left wing. And when they don't declare their bias, but they still lead you to believe that they're just telling you the facts and you can form your own opinion, that in itself is misleading. If there's a bias, they should declare it. This is me proactively declaring mine. I'm a conservative, and in this episode, you're going to hear things from my lens. But I'll tell you what, this is one of those topics that I'm a little surprised it's partisan in the first place. We're talking about the ouster of a dictator who had to go. Let's sort out what happened over the last couple of days, and we'll start off now with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault, and it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolás Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history. And if you think about it, we've done some other good ones, like the attack on Soleimani, the attack on al-Baghdadi, and the obliteration and decimation of the Iran nuclear sites just recently in an operation known as Midnight Hammer.
I got to tell you, Trump sounds like he's half asleep here. I know that this was an early morning news. Actually, it wasn't even that early. I think they did this one at 10:30. Hey, he sounds exhausted here. No doubt he was up. Apparently, he had a live feed of the operation as it was happening. That's common for the president to be able to watch in through cameras that the armed forces are wearing. He doesn't sound all that inspired here, though, in this speech. I was hoping for a little bit more because getting rid of Nicolás Maduro is something that I thought all leaders agreed on needed to be done. In fact, let me give you just a couple of examples. This isn't really a partisan issue. This is an issue of Donald Trump. And I mean the controversy that has come since this whatever it was happened. It wasn't an invasion. The U.S. isn't occupying Venezuela right now. They went in, they got their guy, and they took him back to a ship, and then from the ship, they got him to New York. I have to think the reason they put him in New York is because, well, they don't want to abduct and then execute a foreign leader. And Florida, which is where I thought he would have gone, has the death penalty, whereas New York does not have the death penalty. So that might play into it. It might not. It's just something that's on my mind. Again, I didn't think this would be a partisan issue because we've been talking about getting rid of Maduro for years. Let's go back to 1989, shall we? 1989. Then Senator Joe Biden talked about the need to get rid of these dictators and go get them where they live.
For the first time, we are fighting and losing a war on our own soil. Let's go after the drug lords where they live with an international strike force. There must be no safe haven for these narco-terrorists, and they must know it.
And as you know, Joe Biden went on to become president of the United States. He was fully in favor of sending strike forces, as he called them, into other countries to remove these drug lords. And in this case, the drug lord was the illegitimate president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. So the U.S. sent in a strike force and they got him. How they did that, by the way, was absolutely unbelievable. I'm going to talk about that later on in the episode. But first, I want to continue to show you that this was not a controversial or a partisan issue until after Donald Trump did it. In fact, our former prime minister, Justin Trudeau, got asked a question about this back in 2019.
What's very disturbing to me is Venezuela and Cuba are close allies. They've helped each other. They've just had an election and Canada chooses not to recognize the new government, but yet we recognize the new president of Brazil, where Brazil locked up the leading candidate and didn't allow him to run in the campaign. So if you could answer that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
In regards to your question on Venezuela, I would propose to you, sir, that anyone who contends to be a friend of Venezuela, whether it's Cuba or Canada or an individual, anyone who contends that they are a friend to the Venezuelan people should be very clear in standing up and condemning the Maduro government that has been responsible for terrible oppression, for terrible marginalization, for a humanitarian crisis the likes of which South America has not seen in a long time, leading to mass exodus, tremendous a number of refugees fleeing all across South America, all because of an illegitimate dictator named Maduro, who is continuing to not respect their constitution, the rule of law, and the principles of what is true and fair for the future.
Okay, there it is. And that's right from our former Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Let's be really, really clear about where things stand here. Until Donald Trump actually went in and removed Maduro, everybody agreed Maduro had to go. Joe Biden agreed he had to go. Justin Trudeau agreed he had to go. You know what? Let's not stop there. Let's go even further. The highest ranking congressional Democrat is Chuck Schumer. Here's him talking about Maduro back in 2020.
He brags about all these things he wants to do or is doing, but his actions belie his words. Maybe the best metaphor was his claim to bring democracy to Venezuela. There was a big policy there. it flopped. If the policy was working, Juan Guaido wouldn't be in the balcony here. He'd be in Venezuela. He'd be sitting in the president's palace, or at least waging a fight to win. He's here. And the president brags about his Venezuela policy? Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime. The Maduro regime is more powerful today and more entrenched today than it was when the president began.
That was Chuck Schumer taking shots at Donald Trump for not doing anything about Nicolás Maduro. Well, it's amazing how much things have changed. And again, it is just because it was Donald Trump that did it. Let me play for you just a little bit of Chuck Schumer, same guy who was criticizing Donald Trump for not going in and doing something about Maduro. 5 years ago, he was doing that. How does he feel now in 2026?
Let me be clear. Maduro is an illegitimate dictator, but launching military action without congressional authorization, without a credible plan for what comes next, is reckless. Now, I was in the skiff on 3 different occasions, as recently as December. And I asked the administration, I asked them, are you pursuing regime change? Are you intent on taking military action in Venezuela, Venezuelan territory? And they assured me that they were not pursuing those things. Clearly, they're not being straight with the American people. So I've been talking to so many members of my caucus today. Everybody is very, very just totally troubled, worried about how dangerous this is.
Why is it dangerous now? Why does Chuck Schumer think this is dangerous? Simply because Donald Trump didn't give the enemy a fair warning that he was coming. He just went in and took Maduro. He executed a warrant, essentially, because Maduro has already been indicted in America because of his drug trafficking activities. Why would the president need congressional approval? And part of the reason I'm asking that is because, well, Barack Obama didn't go and ask for congressional approval when he was dropping thousands of bombs all over the world. He didn't do that. Many presidents have led actions like this that didn't require congressional approval. So it does kind of seem like the Americans are rewriting the rules a little bit because they don't like how this was handled. And maybe you don't either. To me, I thought it was incredible what happened. The incredible power and might of the U.S. armed forces. I think they were sending a message when they did that with Maduro yesterday. And I think that if you are a dictator that is leading your country, trying to oppress your people and prevent democracy from splashing across the nation, then you're on notice that you're on Trump's radar. This was Trump showing how easily they can do it. Let me put it to you like this. Before I get to a little bit more of the president, and you're going to hear about the operation itself from General Kane, and then you're going to hear from the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Before I get to that, just think about this. The U.S. flew a couple of helicopters into Caracas. They landed in a military compound where they knew Maduro and his wife were staying. They got off the copter with barely a shot fired. The Marines went in, they put him in handcuffs and his wife. They read them their rights, put them back on the helicopter, and bam, they were gone right back to the ship. Again, hardly a shot fired. What do you suppose would happen if another country landed helicopters on the front lawn of the White House, came out armed, and said, "We're here to arrest your president"? Do you think it would go down like that without a shot fired, essentially? Do you think they would just roll over and say, "All right, take him"? I don't think it would. It almost kind of seems like the military handed over Maduro because there was very, very little resistance when the Americans went in there. They didn't even lose a piece of equipment. This was a relatively easy mission. In hindsight, thank God it was. We wouldn't want it to be dangerous, but this does seem like a fairly easy one. They got this one done very, very quickly. Let's hear a little bit more of President Trump talking about the operation in Venezuela.
No nation in the world could achieve what America achieved yesterday, or frankly, in just a short period of time. All Venezuelan military capacities were rendered powerless as the men and women of our military, working with U.S. law enforcement, successfully captured Maduro in the dead of night. It was dark. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise that we have. It was dark and it was deadly. But captured along with his wife, Celia Flores, both of whom now face American justice. Maduro and Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York, it's Jay Clayton, for their campaign of deadly narco-terrorism against the United States and its citizens. I want to thank the men and women of our military who achieved such an extraordinary success overnight with breathtaking speed, power, precision, and competence. You rarely see anything like it. You've seen some raids in this country that didn't go so well. They were an embarrassment. If you look back to Afghanistan or if you look back to the Jimmy Carter days, they were different days. We're a respected country again, like...
Okay, I'm going to cut him off. No disrespect to the president, but I mean, A, this is boring, and we're not really learning anything, and I'm not even 100% sure he's confident in what he's reading anyway. So we're going to move on from the president, although he did do a news conference on Air Force One when he was returning from Florida to Washington last night. You'll hear a little bit of that coming up. Right now, I think this is a good time to learn a little bit more about the operation. The man who led the operation is General Kane, and here is him talking a little bit about how the American forces got this done.
After months of work by our intelligence teammates to find Maduro and understand how he moved, where he lived, where he traveled, what he ate, what he wore, what were his pets, in early December, our force was set pending a series of aligned events. Key was choosing the right day to minimize the potential for civilian harm and maximize the element of surprise and minimize the harm to the indicted personnel so, as the president said, they could be brought to justice. And as the president said earlier today, weather in Venezuela is always a factor this time of the year. And over the weeks through Christmas and New Year's, the men and women of the United States military sat ready, patiently waiting for the right triggers to be met and the president to order us into action. Last night, the weather broke just enough, clearing a path that only the most skilled aviators in the world could maneuver through. Ocean, mountain, low clouds, ceilings. But when tasked with a mission, this organization does not quit. At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time last night, the president ordered the United States military to move forward with this mission. He said to us, and we appreciate it, Mr. President, good luck and Godspeed. And those words were transmitted to the entire joint force. Over the course of the night, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases on land and sea across the Western Hemisphere. In total, more than 150 aircraft, bombers, fighters, intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, rotary wing were in the air last night. Thousands and thousands of hours of experience were airborne. Our youngest crew member was 20, and our oldest crew member was 49, and there's simply no match for American military might. As the night began, the helicopters took off with the extraction force, which included law enforcement officers, and began their flight into Venezuela at 100 feet above the water. As they approached Venezuelan shores, the United States began layering different effects provided by Spacecom, Cybercom, and other members of the interagency to create a pathway. Overhead, those forces were protected by aircraft from the United States Marines, the United States Navy, the United States Air Force, and the Air National Guard. The force included F-22s, F-35s, F-18s, EA-18s, E-2s, B-1 bombers, and other support aircraft, as well as numerous remotely piloted drones. As the force began to approach Caracas, the Joint Air Component began dismantling and disabling the air defense systems in Venezuela, employing weapons to ensure the safe passage of the helicopters into the target area. The goal of our air component was, and always will be to protect the helicopters and the ground force and get them to the target and get them home. As the force crossed the last point of high terrain where they'd been hiding in the clutter, we assessed that we had maintained totally the element of surprise. As the helicopter force ingressed towards the objective at low level, we arrived at Maduro's compound at 1:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or 2:01 a.m. Caracas local time, and the apprehension force descended into Maduro's compound and moved with speed, precision, and discipline towards their objective and isolated the area to ensure the safety and security of the ground force while apprehending the indicted persons. On arrival into the target area, the helicopters came under fire, and they replied with that fire with overwhelming force in self-defense. One of our aircraft was hit, but remained flyable, and as the president said earlier today, all of our aircraft came home, and that aircraft remained flyable during the rest of the mission. As the operation unfolded at the compound, our air and ground intelligence teams provided real-time updates to the ground force, ensuring those forces could safely navigate the complex environment without unnecessary risk. The force remained protected by overhead tactical aviation. Maduro and his wife, both indicted, gave up and were taken into custody by the Department of Justice, assisted by our incredible U.S. military with professionalism and precision, with no loss of U.S. life.
I'm going to leave General Kane there, but wow, that is a very comprehensive assessment of what happened in the abduction. Is that how we say it? I guess it was an abduction of Nicolás Maduro and his wife. The military went in. They were extremely well organized. They'd done a ton of planning for this operation. They did so much recon in advance to study his habits, what he's into, where he goes, even what he eats and what kind of pets he has and things like that. They were completely ready for almost every contingency. And they executed the plan flawlessly. That's a major testament to the power of the U.S. Armed Forces. And I mean, you can't take anything away from them, no matter how you feel about this operation and what the Americans did. You can't take anything away from the skill and expertise and precision of those fighters, because that was simply incredible how they executed that. I'm sure there's going to be a movie, and I can't wait for it. I can't wait. Now let's get into some of the response. I'm going to try and address some of the questions that some people have about this, because as I said at the beginning of this episode, there's a lot of people who think, yeah, it's probably good that Maduro's gone, but I don't like Donald Trump, and I don't want to support anything that Donald Trump does. So, I'm not sure how I feel, or, I'm just going to be opposed to this because it's Trump. Some people are using the excuse, and you heard it earlier in the pod as well, that Donald Trump should have had congressional approval before he went in and took Maduro. Here is U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This is him talking yesterday on NBC's Meet the Press.
This was not an action that required congressional approval. In fact, it couldn't require congressional approval because this was not an invasion. This is not an extended military operation. This is a very precise operation that involved a couple of hours of action. It was a very delicate operation, too. It was one that required all these conditions to be in place at the right time in the right place. You couldn't afford leaks. We couldn't afford anything out there that would have endangered the mission and gotten people killed or killed off the mission and the optionality. We didn't even know if the mission was going to happen. How can you notify something you're not even sure if it can happen? Because in order for it to happen, you needed to have weather conditions in place. He needed to be at the right place at the right time. We needed to have forces prepared to go. There were a lot of factors in place. It was a trigger-based operation. But you can't notify that, number one, because you don't even know if it's going to happen, if those conditions will ever align. And number two, you can't risk it being disclosed. But this was not an attack on Venezuela. This was a law enforcement function to capture an indicted drug trafficker. And of course, we needed the Department of War to support it because they do have anti-aircraft missiles that could shoot down those helicopters.
But will you?
We had to take down radars. We had to take down those anti-air elements on the way in and on the way out, and that's what this was limited to.
But will you seek congressional approval for any further action in Venezuela or the region?
Well, we will seek congressional approval for actions that require congressional approval.
And I think that's basically what it comes down to. You just heard Secretary Rubio explaining all the different reasons that it wasn't practical or necessary to have congressional approval. There's certain operations that a president can just approve, and in this case, President Trump approved it. Let's hear more from Secretary Rubio. He was also on this was ABC. He was on with George Stephanopoulos. This is him on This Week. Listen to this.
This was, in essence, at its core, a law enforcement function. Okay, the Department of Justice, dating back in the Biden administration, that had a $25 million reward for his capture. So we have a reward for his capture, but we're not going to enforce it. That's the difference between President Trump and everybody else. It's easy to make a wanted poster and say $50 million for the capture of Maduro, but no one takes that seriously because you're not going to do anything about it. President Trump did something about it.
Let me ask you.
He did something about it. We went in, we grabbed him, he was arrested, and he's now in New York. No Americans were killed, no equipment was lost. It had to be done, and it's been done. And I assure you, the people left behind in Venezuela now that are in charge of the police and everything else, I assure you, they're going to probably be a lot more compliant than Maduro was as a result of this.
Do you think that answers the questions about whether or not congressional approval was needed and whether or not it was even practical to get it? I know that that's a big talking point from some is, yep, Maduro had to go, but Trump shouldn't have done it like that. He should have gone and asked for congressional approval. After hearing Secretary Rubio, if I'm being honest, I kind of agree with Secretary Rubio. And I know, because I've been alive for a number of years, that many presidents have launched targeted operations without congressional approval. And I don't see the difference between those ones and the one that President Trump did. Let's hear just a little bit more of Secretary Rubio before we get to the main point here. Everybody's wondering, what does this have to do with oil? We'll get there. It's coming up. Here's Secretary Rubio on Meet the Press.
Okay, number one, most of the experts that people have on television, I watch these experts and it's clown hour. Okay, these are people that have focused their entire career on the Middle East or some other part of the world because that's where all the action was. Very few of them know anything about Venezuela or the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela looks nothing like Libya. It looks nothing like Iraq. It looks nothing like Afghanistan. It looks nothing like the Middle East other than the Iranian agents that are running through their plotting against America. Okay, these are Western countries with long traditions among their at a people-to-people and cultural level and ties to the United States. So there's nothing like that. So I think people need to stop ascribing the apples and oranges here, the apples of the Middle East to the oranges of the Western Hemisphere.
But do you...
Number two, this is about the national interest of the United States. And what I'm confident of is we are in a safer and better place because we're taking it seriously. The alternative would have been to leave Maduro there as an indicted drug trafficker, illegitimate president, running the country, open invitation for all of our adversaries to do whatever they want against the United States from Venezuela. That was not going to continue. The alternative would have been to allow a drug trafficker to continue to use national territory and elements of nation-state power to further drug trafficking organizations. Read the indictment. This guy used the levers of their security apparatus not to arrest drug traffickers, but to cooperate and facilitate the trafficking of drugs for the purpose of getting them into the United States. And that's going to stop.
Okay, Secretary Rubio saying it the way it is, commenting on the number of experts that have all of a sudden showed up on all of the network newscasts to say that this was a terrible thing. He's disagreeing with them on political reasons and on ideological reasons, and he's perfectly entitled to do that. Again, that was U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. There's a lot of people who think that two different things are happening here. Number one, Trump is trying to control not just America, and not just North America, but this hemisphere. He's making the case that China is over there and China can deal with their neighbors and Russia can go and deal with Russia's neighbors, but America is going to deal with its hemispheric neighbors, and those include Venezuela. So the U.S. has a vested interest in doing that. He's also indicating that maybe it is time to take over Greenland. I'll get to that coming up too. It's amazing how much is going on here for a first day back. Wow. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Before this operation in Venezuela happened, there was a number of people who pointed out a video that was circulating, a theory that President Trump would invade Venezuela for the oil. And Venezuela is one of those countries, just like Canada, that has an abundance of what's called heavy crude. This is a thicker oil than you find, for example, in the Middle East. And the heavy crude is used for different operations, and the U.S. wants it. They need it. And they do very well at refining it. Well, until now, they get most of their heavy crude from Canada. But we aren't exactly playing ball with the Americans, and the update from over the holidays is no new negotiations. No, we have not worked things out with Donald Trump. No, we're still not even talking, and we are no closer to a deal with the Americans to end the tariffs and the trade war, quote unquote. So there's nothing happening there between Canada and the U.S. Donald Trump has said from day one, we don't need anything Canada's got. And I disagreed because I thought there's a lot that the U.S. could benefit from that we have here in Canada if we could just work out a deal. But Trump said he doesn't need any of it. Now, unfortunately, he might not need any of it. If the U.S. is actually controlling Venezuela, and there's no reason to think right now they're not, there's an interim government there. Surely they're going to call for free and fair democratic elections. I would expect the Americans to lead the call for that right away. And if they don't, that's a missed opportunity. The Americans are not there to occupy Venezuela. They are there to liberate the people of Venezuela and make sure that free and fair elections take place. That's what should happen next. But a lot of people feel that this is really just about the oil. The U.S. went in there and they used Maduro as an excuse. They went in because they wanted to control the oil. There was no shortage of questions about that for U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday. I want to play for you a little bit from ABC News with George Stephanopoulos. This is a question for Secretary Rubio.
But how does the United States intend to secure the oil fields? Won't that take U.S. troops?
Well, ultimately, this is not about securing the oil fields. This is about ensuring that no sanctioned oil can come in and out until they make changes to the governance of that entire industry. Because right now, that industry is non-existent in the traditional way. These oil fields basically are pirate operations. People literally steal the oil from the ground. That's how they hold this regime together. A handful of cronies benefit from this oil, specific oil wells. They're producing at like 18% capacity because the equipment is all decrepit, and they basically pocket the money to their benefit. They sell the oil at a discount in global markets, 40 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar, but all that money goes to them. Those oil fields have not benefited the people of Venezuela in over a decade, but they have made multi-millionaires, billionaires, out of just a handful of people, and that's what's held this regime together. That's what needs to be addressed. The way to address it to the benefit of the Venezuelan people is to get private companies that are not from Iran or somewhere else to go in, invest in the equipment that hasn't been invested in 20 years because none of the profits that have been made from the oil have been reinvested. It's all been stolen. And that's going to take outside companies that come in and know how to do that. The people who do this stuff will know how to do it. But it all begins with dramatic changes at the way on the way that the authorities that are in charge of that industry behave. And until those changes happen, this quarantine will remain in place.
That's a really interesting one because what Secretary Rubio is saying there is basically a lot of the oil has been pirated. There's a lot of oil in Venezuela, but it's not actually benefiting the Venezuelan people because, well, the country is corrupt, led by Maduro himself. He was into drugs and he was into oil shipping. The U.S. seized some oil tankers, and a lot of people are using that as evidence to say, well, see, it was just about the oil. That was sanctioned oil that shouldn't have been going out to the free market. What the U.S. says they want to do is put in fair and impartial companies, and they're talking specifically about American companies. They're not trying to lobby for other countries' oil companies to go in and take advantage of Venezuela. No doubt they want American oil companies to go in there and extract that oil. But if they do that and the money benefits the people of Venezuela, aren't they still better off than they are now? The U.S., of course, would have access to the oil if it's their companies doing it, and it doesn't seem like there's any Venezuelan companies that could do it. Otherwise, they would have been. And right now, even though Venezuela has the largest or one of the largest reserves of oil on Earth, more than Canada, they're only producing a minuscule amount compared to what they could be producing. And maybe hope is on the way here. Maybe gas is about to get a heck of a lot cheaper. Maybe Canada's screwed. Maybe we should have got that deal done with the Americans, Mark Carney, because now they've got another option and now they really might not need us. One more question on the oil. Here is Marco Rubio. This is back to NBC's Meet the Press.
States need to take over the Venezuelan oil industry.
Well, we don't need to. First of all, let me go back up. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We have plenty of oil in the United States. What we're not going to allow is for the oil industry in Venezuela to be controlled by adversaries of the United States. You have to understand, why does China need their oil? Why does Russia need their oil? Why does Iran need their oil? They're not even in this continent. This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live. And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be a base of operation for adversaries, competitors, and rivals of the United States.
Have specific oil companies?
We also want to see that oil and the proceeds from it. Hold on. We want to see the oil proceeds of that country benefit the people of Venezuela. Why have 8 million people left Venezuela? 8 million, the single largest mass migration probably in modern history, left Venezuela since 2014 because all the wealth of that country was stolen to the benefit of Maduro and his cronies in the regime, but not to the benefit of people of Venezuela. You know how destabilizing 8 million migrants is? The number one fear that Brazil has, that Colombia has, that all these countries in the region have about what's happening in Venezuela and our involvement is they're afraid of another mass migration event. That's what they fear. This is deeply destabilizing stuff. It's not going to continue to happen. They are not going to come from outside of our hemisphere, destabilize our region in our own backyard, and us have to pay the price for it. Not under President Trump.
Okay, there's the explanation from the U.S. administration, and you don't have to believe it. You don't have to think, oh, okay, well, everything he said there is the honest to God truth, and he's being very upfront about his intentions and think that everything's good. You're welcome to feel however you want to feel, but that is the counter narrative to what you're seeing on the news. And frankly, I feel like from scanning around, the news is being very dishonest. Up until this actually got done, I thought everybody agreed Maduro had to go. Up until this happened, I thought everybody agreed that that was just how the U.S. does certain things. No, they don't always go and get congressional approval. The president can approve certain operations, and when those operations are for the greater good, we do them. We went in and did something very, very similar when we got Osama bin Laden. They did something very, very similar when they caught Saddam Hussein. And there are other examples in history. I don't know why this is so controversial other than it was Donald Trump that did it. And you know what? A horrible dictator is gone. The people of Venezuela are about to be free. They're about to prosper again and really see the benefit of being an oil-producing nation. I really believe that the Venezuelan people are on an upward trajectory, and I think that that's great. But is Trump done? There's a lot of people who think he's not, that think he's just looking to pick a fight with countries in the Middle East. Again, feel that way if you want. I personally don't see it that way. And I don't think he wants a long, drawn-out conflict with any country. He seems to be right into these very surgical strikes that are very effective, get out, and no U.S. boots on the ground. And I think that that's the way this is going to go with Venezuela as well. But time will tell. There is one country, though, that I'm a little bit worried about because I'm not quite sure how this is going to go. How do we feel about Cuba and Greenland? Greenland is one because when Donald Trump started talking about making Canada the 51st state, he also talked about how much he would love to have Greenland as an American territory. Greenland is an interesting one because there's a lot of interest in it. It has a direct connection to the Arctic, and the Arctic, they say, is the next great frontier. Not only is it full of oil and minerals and resources, it's a transit route. It's many, many different things. And the U.S. doesn't have a presence in the Arctic unless they can work out a deal with Canada or unless they have an Arctic territory, and that would be Greenland. Is Trump actually going to try and annex them, and would they be into it?
I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true.
Sir,
they thought that was a great move.
What would the justification be for a claim to Greenland? What would the justification?
Oh, I don't want to talk about Greenland now. I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it. And they know that.
Very interesting. He's saying even the EU wants America to have Greenland and defend it and set up military bases and all the other things that the U.S. wants to do with it. There's some indication that the people of Greenland wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. They're interested in hearing an offer. But is Denmark just going to give up a massive territory with a direct connection to the Arctic? I'm not sure that they are. Is the U.S. going to take it by force? I highly doubt it. But one thing the president did say there that I'm very, very interested in is he said Russia and China have got Greenland surrounded by boats. Why would the Russian and Chinese Navy be surrounding Greenland? Is it because they don't want the Americans to have it, or because they intend to take it? The geopolitics of it all, I find very, very fascinating. But that was Greenland. Now let's talk about Cuba. Cuba's an interesting one because here in Canada, we have great relations with Cuba. We love the Cuban people. Many Canadians have vacationed in Cuba, but it's still not allowed in America. Or last time I checked, it wasn't. The Americans don't feel the same way about Cuba how Canadians feel. They also do not have a democratically elected government there in Cuba. They are a communist country. Would the U.S. do something there in Cuba like they just did in Venezuela? That came up, and it was U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham speaking with President Trump on Air Force One last night. This is a kind of a chilling message for the Cuban people.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day. And everybody in the world is thinking differently than they were just a few days ago because of what you did.
Very, very interesting. I don't know that this is necessarily something that I could get behind. Are the Americans talking about an invasion of Cuba, or are they talking about a regime change? And was that all hyperbole, or is something actually going to happen with Cuba? I don't know. Time will tell, remains to be seen. But if that's the sentiment, the U.S. wants to be surrounded by like-minded countries that want to do business and don't want to make their money from drugs, then yeah, I could see something happening in Cuba. As long as, I just hope it's peaceful. I don't want anyone to get hurt, and I don't want any more war. I don't want any more countries to be invaded either, but it seems like this is the way things are trending, particularly here. It's got to be a democracy, no more dictatorships. There was all those no kings rallies that were held only a few months ago. The amount of people that were out saying, no kings, Donald Trump can't be a king, no kings. Well, these were kings. In Venezuela, there is one in Cuba, and if the president is hell-bent on getting rid of them, I would think anyone who was behind the No Kings protests should probably be behind Donald Trump on this one. One more thing, and this will be probably it for this episode. It's about the Monroe Doctrine. This is President Trump talking about something that you might want to Google.
It's about peace on Earth.
How is it peace on Earth?
Peace on Earth. We got to have peace. It's our hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was very important when it was done, and other presidents, a lot of them, they lost sight of it. I didn't lose sight, but it really is, it's peace on Earth.
Now, for those wondering, or maybe you don't want to Google it, let me just give you a quick summary. The Monroe Doctrine is U.S. foreign policy, and it goes back to like the early 1800s. And basically what that doctrine was is that the U.S. opposed European colonialism in the Americas. They declared the Western Hemisphere closed to further European colonization and interference. And they also pledged U.S. non-interference in European affairs. It basically asserted that European meddling in the Americas would be seen as a hostile act against America. And it established a separate sphere of influence, the old world and the new world. Well, the U.S. said, we'll stay out of your politics, you stay out of ours. That's the Monroe Doctrine. And by and large, it's mainly held up. Save a few different conflicts here and there and a few different foreign policy decisions. For the most part, it has held up. There hasn't been any more European colonization, and the U.S. has more or less stayed out of European affairs. Will that change now after what happened in Argentina? And what is going to happen in Cuba and in Greenland? And what's next for Canada? If the U.S. has access to unlimited oil resources in Venezuela, is there any point in them doing any business with us? We may need to build a pipeline now because the U.S. as our only customer, we might not have any customers. for long if the U.S. is successful in getting the oil industry up and running in Venezuela. Friends, this was a good way to start off the new season. I'm glad that we could go in depth and talk about what's happening in Venezuela right now, and we could talk about freedom, and we could talk about the dictators that are still in place in various countries around the world. I want to thank you for your time today. We are back to daily episodes, and again, some days there may even be more than one episode, so keep an eye, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe. If you could, tell a friend too. This is the best I think you're going to get in podcast form to unbiased information. I'll declare my bias, but we all have one, but I'm going to try and keep it as neutral as possible as I talk about the big issues, help you understand them. I help myself understand them in a lot of cases, and we do this every single day on Scott Fox After 9. Today, I will leave you with the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now, keep an eye out for that silent date update later on this week, and I'll catch you right back here in less than 24 hours.